Well, hello everybody. Welcome back. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. I'm back and I have an interesting video for you. Today we're going to take this Suzuki DR200. We're going to change the oil and the oil filter. So stay with me. I hope you enjoy the video. I'm going to need a 17 millimeter socket. I'm going to need a 10 millimeter socket. I've got a 3/8 ratchet, and because that little 10 millimeter socket is 1/4 inch drive, I have a 3/8 down to 1/4 adapter. I'm also going to need a small bucket to drain the oil out of the bike. I'm going to need a rag, a new oil filter, just like this, and the new oil filter cover O-ring, as well as the oil filter itself O-ring. Now, that's the parts. Obviously, we're going to need a funnel and the oil of our choice. I'm going to be using GN4 4-stroke 1040 motorcycle oil, and for this bike we need 1 quart. You can also buy it in a bigger portion like this. It's good oil. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take off this little cover here. Now this bike has been running, so the oil inside of the housing in here is hot. So I'm going to take this off. Just going to kind of clean it a little bit. The reason I'm taking that plug off is because I need to allow the oil to flow out so that the plug comes off, so it doesn't create a vacuum and stop that process from happening or slow it down. So let's get started with my 17 millimeter socket. We're going to go underneath the bike and we are going to pull the oil plug out. So underneath the bike you can see 2 of these. I'm going to take this one off. I'm just going to pop this baby loose. Now this is the very first oil change that this bike has had. These are original miles. This bike has just a little bit over 300 miles on it. Now as I'm unthreading this, I'm pushing up towards the bike because I want to keep that oil in there and I don't want it to fall until I'm ready to let it fall. So I'm going to just keep holding that up, and then every once in a while I just kind of test it. There we go. And obviously you can see that the oil is draining down into my ice cream bucket. Now since this is the very first oil change of the bike, it's not uncommon to see metal shavings and things like that in the oil. So don't let that bother you if you see that. Right now the bike's on the kickstand, so let's straighten it up a little bit. Make sure we're getting all that oil out. And I hope you can see all that. So I'm just going to let it drain until it stops draining. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for all this oil to drain, again, I'm going to say this again, I'm going to clean the oil drain plug a little bit. Nothing too crazy, don't lose it. Again, that was the 17 millimeter socket. That's what the plug looks like. So now I'm going to take these 3 cap head screws or nuts, whatever you want to call them, and I'm going to take the 10 millimeter and I'm going to remove those to expose the oil filter. So these are 10 millimeter. So there's that one. There's the second one. And the third one. Get these off. Shoot. They're loose to the touch, so I might as well just use my hands, my fingers. So we have 3 little nuts like that. I'm going to take those off, keep them close, don't lose them. Nothing too crazy, pretty simple process. And the third one, These are finger tight. You notice that things weren't like crazy tight. So there's the 3 nuts. Now I'm going to pull this oil filter cap off. Whoops, looks like we spilled a little bit. Happens. Let's pull that oil cup off. And on the inside of the oil filter cap, you'll see there is this black O-ring. We're going to change that O-ring. We're going to replace that with a new one. This one you can see is kind of flattened out. So I'm just cleaning all this material, making sure that my spring is still intact. Nothing crazy. Just cleaning that up. Let's take our new O-ring right here. Set that right inside. Take a little bead of oil off of your finger and just kind of coat the O-ring with a little bit of oil. And from here, we're going to pull this oil filter out. This is the old oil filter, obviously. And while I'm here, I'm going to just kind of look closely at the oil filter for signs of metal, leakage, debris, anything like that. Now obviously when I look at the new oil filter, I want to compare them to make sure they're the same size, same hole and stuff like that, which we have this the same style of oil filter, because sometimes you'll order one and it's the wrong one. So the new oil filter has a hole in one side and it does not have a hole in the other side. The side with the hole goes in towards the bike. And if you want to replace that O-ring, it's housed right around that little shaft there. Let me see if I can zoom in and give you a glimpse of that. See that O-ring right there about above my finger? That's the O-ring. So I'm going to try to get my finger in there and pull that old O-ring out. There it is. Right there. That's the old O-ring. Come on, let's focus. So I'm going to take the new O-ring and compare it to the old one. The new one's on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and take that new O-ring and I'm going to install it inside the bike here. But I'm going to use my rag right quick to just kind of clean this area out. I want it nice and clean inside of there. And now I'm going to put the new O-ring around that little piece. Just kind of push it back until it touches the metal. Nothing crazy, folks. Pretty simple process. Back my camera off again. So once we have the new O-ring in and we have the new O-ring on the cap, we can now take the new filter and we can put the hole, again the hole corresponds onto that new O-ring. So it's going to fit something like this. Now we can put this new the cap back on. We're going to finger tight these little 10mm nuts. We're not going to go crazy and make them too tight. You can strip these out, so you want to be careful. One thing that I want to note is that just to be aware that the spring on the oil filter cap here needs to line up with the oil filter itself. There's a little groove on the oil filter. I'll show you that in a second. Right here on the old one, you see this groove. That spring goes inside of that little groove. It's pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy. Very simple. Obviously you can see that my left hand here is on the exhaust manifold, exhaust pipe. Be careful with that. This thing could be real hot depending on how much you ran your bike before the oil change. Now I'm just going to kind of finger tighten these three. Nothing too crazy. And let's go ahead and get that 3/8 drive, and let's change this thing to tighten. We're going to just tighten this cap. Now I can't stress this enough. This cap does not need to be gorilla tight, folks. Just snug it up. Just snug it up. Just tight. Just tight enough. Doesn't need to be anything excessive, because if you start getting crazy on this, you could easily strip those little nuts off of them little stems. We also want to take and pay a little attention right now to the oil sight glass. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of take my rag here, clean that area out. Sometimes you have dust or debris in the way of that sight glass, so we're going to need that nice and clean. We'll go ahead and install the oil plug underneath. Now that we know that we've got all the oil out of the bike. Same thing here. Doesn't need to be gorilla tight. Just snug it up. Obviously we don't want them too loose. We don't want it to come out or anything like that while we're riding. So that's plenty tight, just like that. Nothing too crazy. I always see people over tighten things when they don't need to. From here, we're going to take the funnel, stick the funnel in there, and now we'll pour our new quart of oil. Again, I'm using GN4 Motorcycle 10W40 for this bike. I mentioned it before. This bike takes approximately 1 quart of oil. So let's go ahead and pour that in right there. Nice, new, clean, beautiful oil. It's a pretty simple process to change the oil on these motorcycles, and it definitely will save your engine, will last a lot longer. You can see the oil starting to peak on the sight glass there, and that's good. I can see the oil a little bit on the sight glass. You can see the oil level. I've got all the oil out of this quart now into the bike. Now let me see if I can pull this thing up a little bit. Hopefully you can still see that sight glass when I do this. See the oil level in the sight glass? That looks good. So we've got that finished. And at this point what we've got to do, 2 simple things. We're going to take our funnel out and we're going to put our oil fill plug back in. And you can see on the oil fill plug it says 10W40. So we're going to go ahead and put that on. And it's going to get loud here in a second because I'm going to start the bike up and I'm going to let the oil cycle through the system. So be prepared to hear this engine start. If you got your volume up real loud, you might want to turn it down. Here we go. Let's start the bike. Now I'm just kind of cleaning up my area, getting rid of the old oil filter and the old oil filter O-rings. These are good to hang on to, these old oil filter O-rings, because sometimes you might buy oil filters and it doesn't have the O-ring. If you're curious about what filter I'm using, it's a WIX filter. Number, what is that? 24949. I got this off of Amazon. Alright, now let's take a look. Let's let it kind of cool down a little bit. What we've just done is we've just cycled oil through the motor, and you can see the glass here. It's got the oil level real nice. It's got a low line and a full line, and as long as our oil's within those 2 lines, it's within the spectrum of the amount of oil that this bike needs. Again, I think it's really neat that this bike only takes 1 quart of oil. That is such a nice thing, and it makes maintenance very easy on this bike. Very well thought out. You know, Suzuki did a good job on this bike. So folks, that's about it. This oil protects not only the piston and things like that, but it also protects, the crankshaft, and it protects the transmission as well. So if your bike is shifting kind of rough or hard to get back to neutral or hard to get, you might want to consider changing your oil, because that generally, from what I know, helps things out tremendously. So again, I want to say thank you for watching. I hope you got some good, useful information out of this video. If you like the type of content that you see on my channel, please don't hesitate. Hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you. And until next time, thanks again for watching, and have a beautiful day. Now go change your oil on your bike.